Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And we are so glad that you're joining us here this week for our exclusive conversation with Richard Karn from Home Improvement, from Family Feud, from Bingo America. You name it, he's been in it. He's got another Christmas movie coming out, which we'll talk about very shortly. But first, Elizabeth, last week you ended the show with some words that really triggered me. You said...
Were they stay home, stay safe?
Yeah. So stay home, stay safe. I mentioned the parent group that I have with my kids' friends' parents on Facebook, and there's been one person in particular who I'm very good friends with who's very triggered by a lot of words that she never wants to ever hear again. Would you like to hear the list?
Sure.
Good. You have no choice. Here we go. Never ever want to hear again. Unprecedented times.
Okay.
Challenging times. Uncertain times. The new normal. Ugh, I hate that. Here's some more. We never want to hear social distancing. Flatten the curve. We're all in this together. Do your part. Let's see. Hold on. There's a few more here. Yeah, homeschooling. We talked about that last week because that's going so brilliantly well. Oh, here's a good meme. How I used to begin work emails. Hi. How work emails have been going now. I hope your family is in good health. It's like, let's have to stop hearing that. Stay healthy and safe.
I do get that a lot. And what am I supposed to say? Now, our family has been healthy the entire time. But do you think I'm going to write back, we're all dying, we all have, you know what I'm saying? Like, even if we were sick, would I tell you?
Probably not. You don't want to admit, nobody wants to admit that.
To me, I hope your family is in good health. What is my response to that?
We are. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your thoughts.
We're good. Yep. All right, then. I mean, we are fine. But I have been getting that a lot. Are you guys okay? As opposed to what? No, we're not okay. I'm trapped in a house with my children. I'm on week 6.
And
no,
your
I'm
husband.
not okay.
With no time apart.
Right. They never leave. They never leave. As a woman who stays home and gets her laundry done and her shopping done and her house cleaned when they're not home, and they go to school for a couple hours and they come home, and it's fabulous. I love spending time with my children. These people never leave, ever.
Tell them to go on a hike. Your family likes the outdoors besides you. They would enjoy that time away. And so would you.
Well, that would be great. But, it's always, my husband is right, and it's probably 100% me, but we're never done with projects. There's always something.
There's always
time
to take a break.
The outside of our house, for some of you who know that, for a year. So the last couple of nice weekends, he's been painting the outside of our house.
Another 1 to 5 hours will not kill you guys.
I
Tell him to
that.
take the children
I'm
and
not sure
go.
He's willing to take those children into the woods because I'm not sure they'll come back.
Oh, no. Okay. On that note, let's move into today's show. Yikes. Oh, by the way, we're on social media. We are on Facebook. If you search Facebook for Fancounters, you'll find us. We are also at Sharpie Nation, a private Facebook group for our most loyal fans. You can join there. And lastly, if you have a guest that you want to hear on the show, give us a holler. Email us at
hello@fancounters.com.
And we'll try and get that person on the show. And if we do, we'll try and get you involved in the show as well. Now, this week we've got a wonderful actor, best known for his role on Home Improvement. You are going to hear a behind-the-scenes story about how a very bored Richard Karn was wandering around sound stages when he was taking a break from filming Home Improvement. You're going to find out something shocking he found, which also found its way into an episode of Home Improvement. You might not know. Without further ado, here is our wonderful interview, and I want to thank him so much for the time. Richard Karn.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters. with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're going to, oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Hey, how you doing? It's Richard Karn.
Richard Karn, welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, I want to start today with the role you're most famous for, and one that our audience is most familiar with. It would be, well, the role of Tim Crowley in the 2019 Hallmark Christmas movie Check-In to Christmas. And I know this wasn't your first... Got you there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I know this wasn't your first role in a Christmas movie, but I have to ask, are you an avid watcher of the Hallmark Christmas movies every year?
I haven't been, actually. I mean, I kind of have the movies that I watch for Christmas, and that takes up a lot of time, because it's White Christmas. It's A Wonderful Life, Love Actually. There's like, I even have DVR'd, I have the Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol, because I think that's probably the best Christmas Carol there has been, animated.
Uh-huh.
But I have watched some Hallmark movies, and even though they're clawingly the same, I mean, a lot of the same setups, a lot of the same situation like that, they still get me. They still tug at the heartstrings.
They're all a little bit different, and I'm an avid watcher of them because my wife and we just like to do that, and we will subscribe to different streaming services just so we have access to Hallmark for the 60 days that they're showing these films. So, yeah, we enjoy them.
Well, you don't have cable?
We dropped DirecTV a couple years ago to go with YouTube TV because it would still give me my local sports, but Hallmark's not a part of that, so I have to go to a different service. Right. But anyway, Elizabeth is my co-host. She's usually here, but because of the COVID situation and all of that, she's just not doing the show for a while. But we are always stunned.
There is technology, I mean, we could have done a three-way conference call kind of a thing.
Yeah, but she does the homeschooling and makes a lot of excuses. So
that's okay.
It's really hard to get around that.
We are allowed during these days
to make excuses.
Well, yeah, just to to make his life as unstressful as possible.
Exactly, I agree. So we have talked to some directors of these Hallmark Christmas movies who will tell us that they're usually filmed in the summer and made to look like winter. Is that when you've been filming your movies? And if so, does that make it hard to really bring home Christmas, that whole heartfelt feeling for you?
Well, Christmas is a state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a set designer that creates the look and feel of Christmas, I mean, you step right into it and you kind of get that, butterflies and excitement. So no, and at first I thought, well, why don't you just wait for the snow? It'll be a lot easier because you don't have to manufacture it, or you don't have to shoot around it. You can just do it in the snow. But then I realized that snow comes with other things that you can't get around. Sometimes it'll be hard for cast or crew to get to the set. True. Or, there could be a lot of other things that would delay production. So, yeah, they do these in September, October, August, September, October, and they are ready to go by November.
It's a very fast turnaround. You've got one coming up this year called The Christmas Dance. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, The Christmas Dance, not really affiliated with Hallmark or Ion or Lifetime or anything like that. It was just a guy that wanted to put this together and had the idea and kind of low budget. And it was I think it turned out right. I haven't seen the finished product, but I think he did a great job.
Cool. And where do you think, is it going to be like a DVD release, or do you see him?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I think he did this maybe on spec, on the idea that he could sell it later. Some people try to get those things up front where they have a distributor before they start doing it, and other people don't have the inclination or the time, or they just go for it. So it depends out there. It's kind of a whole new world because there are so many platforms for movies and things to go out onto. I mean, look, you're streaming, you're watching these movies that would be on Hallmark
Right.
on a regular cable channel, and then you're finding them in different ways. So my kids are finding it, where they can watch it on their phones, or maybe not even the whole thing. I mean, the attention span has kind of gone smaller and smaller as people just want like bits and pieces of things instead of a whole fluid story.
Which is why TikTok seems to be the newest trend, because it's all these 15-second videos that are very quick and to the point.
Very quick and to the point. But what do they leave you with? You need something that delves deeper into our collective psyche, that just makes us better people. And I don't know, when I watch something that is really beautifully and creatively done, I get creative inside, and which allows me to do other things.
We're going to talk about some more creative projects in a little bit, but first let's go back, like you mentioned when we first talked 30 years ago, to home improvement, because obviously that is something I want to hear some stories about. While preparing for the interview, I actually found out for the first time that you heard about the initial audition for the role in a very unconventional place, right?
Yeah. And, speaking of telling stories about our career, I have been, because we're spending so much time at home, I've cleaned the house. I've found all these things, knickknacks and bits of videotape and things like that bring back these huge memories and stuff that I haven't looked at for years and years and years. And I've gone back and I've looked at interviews that I've had, a lot of times kind of going over the same thing. And it always astounded me that I would be asked the same things over and over again. But like you just pointed out, you just found out for the first time on something that I probably said 3 or 4 times 25 years ago.
Wow.
So you never know how people are going to ingest information or find out or whatever. And there's going to be those people out there that overindulge and they hear the same stories over and over again. I don't know how they like that or not, but it's true. I didn't find this in the usual way, but the more and more information that we get out on the internet and interviews and people talking, because we can hear so much stuff from people. We find out that things come to people in lots of different ways. I mean, they're not always the first or second or third choice for a movie, but they were perfect for that movie or for that TV show. And, my story is very similar. I, was a journeyman actor. I graduated from the University of Washington with a professional actor training program, a BFA, in my back pocket, and moved to New York and kind of just looked for theater. Television and film didn't seem as accessible in my mind. It seemed like that was for someone else. I'm not quite sure why in my mind. I'm sure I went out for stuff and I wanted it, but what I ended up doing mostly was theater. And I found theater in summer stocks in different places, in Vermont, in Michigan, in Ohio, just all over the place. Mm-hmm. And one of those summer stocks in Michigan, I worked with the director who basically we kind of fought. We had different ideas of how the role should be done or rehearsed or whatever. And we had a very cantankerous, first impressions of each other. Maybe because he had just done this play at his college and had ideas of what he felt worked there and wanted to, lay them on this production. But I kind of had different ideas, and we fought, and then we opened the show, and what I was doing worked great. And it was my vision, it was my my particular take on stuff, and he was like, okay, yeah, you're right, that was good, and we became friends. I mean, it wasn't easy, but we became friends, and a few years later, he calls me up and says, hey, we need an actor for this playwrights conference. I go, what do you mean an actor for a playwrights conference? Well, the conference was in Indiana, New Harmony, Indiana, close to where he was at teaching school in Evansville. Uh-huh. And they needed actors to read plays while playwrights were still writing them or rewriting them, and they had dramaturgs that would help shape the conflict and the story as it went along, but they still needed actors to hear the story. So when he said, we'd like to bring you out and do that, I go, really? Does it pay? He goes, oh yeah, we'll give you room and board, and we'll give you $100 a week stipend.
A week.
And I went, yeah, a week. And I went, okay, all right, fine. Now today, I don't know how many people can do that.
No, not many.
Really, I mean, truly, because when I was living in New York, this is the 80s, my rent was very, very cheap. I was able to go off, I had a roommate, but I was able to go off and sustain, a couple of weeks with making $100 a week stipend and still come back and be okay. I don't know if you can do that today, but anyway, it turned out that when I went out there, the people that put together this playwrights conference, the New Harmony Project, had just come off the first season of Roseanne. Matt Williams, David McFadzean, and Carmen Finestra were the creators of Roseanne, and they had come through, what was for them a really, really tough year because Roseanne just was not an easy person to work with. And actually, she fired them after the first season. She didn't like me in that play. She didn't like them telling her what she should do or what she needed to do. However, unlike me, when she got the new people in there, she kind of did what they wanted her to do because it was the right thing.
Okay.
I won't go into specifics, but anyway, that's where I met these guys, Matt, David, and Carmen, and we became fast friends. We put together a kind of a skit show of all the different people at this playwrights conference and put it on for the last night. Just kind of a fun spoofing skit kind of a thing, and I worked with them, and we had a great time. And then I went back to New York, and they went back to Los Angeles, and it wasn't 2 or 3 years later that my wife and I, Tootie and I, moved out to California, and that's when I called them.
That would be a good way to get started and get really some solid connections.
Yeah. I mean, I'm basically doing my job. I'm keeping in contact with people that I've met along the way who are doing things. And that's, what you do. You're not obnoxious about it, hopefully, but I would call them and say, hey, I'm in town. They go, great. And they were actually doing a different show. They were doing a show called Carol and Company with Carol Burnett. Okay. And it was a skit show. And they had me come in and do a little tiny role that the ensemble, had the leads and the bigger roles, but they had, 3 or 4 lines for somebody to come in and do. And I did that. And I got to stand next to Carol Burnett, the curtain call. And that was very cool. I mean, that was primetime network television. I didn't do a lot, but it was still a really great thing that they offered me. And then later, when I found out about about Home Improvement, I was able to call them. I was on a, which is not always the smartest thing to do. Sometimes you don't want to bypass the whole casting process with the casting director or the producers because they can get a little, miffed at being looked over. But in this case, I felt like the auditions had already been going on. I called David and I asked him about it. And he goes, yeah, we've seen everybody. We've pretty much cast it all. And there wasn't anything for you in it anyways.
Oh, really?
There really wasn't. There wasn't a role for me. It was kids and Pat, and there was a neighbor who they wanted, but they wanted an older neighbor, and they had Tim had a show called Tool Time, and his assistant Glenn they wanted somebody that was very physically different from Tim, maybe older, taller, and that's who they cast. They cast Stephen Tobolowsky from Groundhog Day. Mm-hmm. He was Ned.
Yes,
in Groundhog
Ned
Day.
Ryerson.
He was older. Yeah. And but what friends do is they said, well, come in and meet our casting director and our director and this and that, and maybe something down the line we can offer you a little guest starring role or whatever. And so I went in there and I had the scene with Glenn at a lathe, and I'm working the lathe and we're doing a scene, and I'm in my head I'm thinking, well, they've seen this scene a million times because they've probably seen 1,000 people for this role. So I didn't have I felt like the parameters of what I should do were wide open because I wasn't trying to be too specific.
Right.
So I went in there and I threw out lathe sounds, kind of like a lightsaber. I was going, I was doing the lathe thing and they were laughing. And then the director, John Pasquin, who actually I'd met 10 years earlier being a reader for him when he was casting a show for Circle Rep, or not Circle Rep, but Circle Stage down in Washington. He said, "Hey, can you make the lathe sound like it's a question?" And I went, "Sure, why not? Yeah." So I'm going, and I did this like it was a question, and they laughed and they thought it was hysterical. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I must be hysterically funny and great in this and that." It wasn't until later that I realized that Tim has this grunt,
yes,
that he would do, and every once in a while there'd be a question, So, they were just playing with me. I didn't really understand the joke, but I still did it. They laughed, made an impression on them. And when Stephen couldn't do the pilot because of another engagement with a movie, they asked me if I wouldn't mind doing the pilot. And that's how I got the job.
Now, did you and Tim Allen click immediately, or did that take some time to establish the relationship that you two had on the show?
That's an interesting question. I think, archetypal characters like Tim and Al, are Laurel and Hardy. They're Bud and Lou. They're the comic and the straight man. They're throughout, our history of theater. I mean, Comedy dell'arte, Tartuffe had these characters that were, had to work with each other and were very different. So, as personal, Tim and Rick, I don't know if we clicked necessarily. I was very, I knew my place. I knew I was there to fill in, and I wasn't going to try and do too much and mess up, what these guys are trying to do. So I was just doing my job and trying to be as real and / funny as I possibly could for the scenes and things like that. So when you say, did we click, we did on certain levels. I can tell that he's a very, very funny guy. And if I can make him laugh, I felt relaxed in the sense that, okay, he's comfortable with me. So we're going along, and Steven got another movie. So even though I just was there to do the pilot, when the show got picked up and they were going to do the series, they needed me for the first 2 or 3 episodes. And obviously they changed the character's name from Glenn to Al, and they just kind of put me there in the background. I think they probably rewrote some of the scenes and took some of Al's character or what he would do out, because they were going to bring Steven back in and they didn't want to make Al too big of a thing right away. But the audiences were seeing something totally different. They were, in whatever I was doing, whether it was nonverbal or physical or physically nonverbal, things like that. They were very appreciative of the Tim and Al relationship before we were as actors and the writers. Obviously, I mean, we were getting things, situational laughs that weren't necessarily in the script, which was kind of cool, and it wasn't till the second or third episode where I had a line that they wrote for to reply to Tim's really bad joke, his really bad pun of hey Al, you think they call it molding here because it's been in the refrigerator too long, and that's it's a lame dad joke basically.
Yep.
And I sat there and I just looked at him and I thought, the audience laughed. I'm going to let them have that laugh. And I just looked at him. I didn't react or do anything. And then just as I'm about to say something, they laugh again because I'm just looking at him. And then when I say, I don't think so, Tim, that gets another laugh. And all of a sudden the writers go, bing, you know what? This is a relationship we didn't know about. We weren't writing towards, but it just fell in our lap. And I think we can work with this. And that's kind of when I got the job for real.
You know, Richard, I got to tell you, when I was just a teenager, 13 or so when the show started, so you were really in my prime of television watching, and I never missed a Home Improvement episode. And even though Tim was the star of the show, you really brought out the laughs of everything that happened on Tool Time. I mean, just you're straight-faced, and I mean, they always mention how, you know, if you only have one or two lines in a project, you can really steal the show. But Al stole the show. It was really great.
But, you know, he stole the show. Well, I don't know if he stole the show, but it wasn't something that I was consciously trying to do. I think I stayed with the truth of what the scene was and let the archetypal characters do their work, basically, and not get in the way of that, and then add my own, you know, little things. I mean, I think if I could go back and do it over again, I might not have been as silly as I was, like, you know, when I'm a fish out of water around girls. You know, that was fun to do for an episode, but, you know, because I did it for that one episode, it became kind of Al's thing. And I wish I was able to direct that in a different way, but, you know, it is what it is. It turned out to be that kind of thing, and they wrote into it and leaned into it, and which meant that I had to, you know, in an odd way. And the same thing with Tim. I mean, Tim had to be dumb on a lot of things, and that rubs him the wrong way. I think that's why he enjoys doing Last Man Standing so much. He gets to really be a little more hands-on and intelligent, and you know, he likes that image of his character self, maybe a little more than Tim.
One of my listeners, I promised I would ask this question for her, because it's funny. People like us who are in our 40s that watch the show, like I said, when I was just beginning to be a teenager, we're showing our kids the show now. So I have a listener, Danielle, who's doing this with her kids. They're rewatching all the Home Improvement episodes. So she just wants to know if you know off the top of your head how many times Al saved Tim's life during those 8 seasons.
Well, inadvertently or, you know, on purpose. You know, I can't. I can think of one big episode where we had the house blow up.
The house blow up, yeah, exactly.
You know, where and I grab him and we dive to the ground. I mean, that possibly was maybe the largest example of Tim being quick on his feet, because, you know, once he realized the clapper and Tim claps and all of a sudden, you know, the gas leak and the explosion, that was funny. Funny story about that house. That house was on the Warner Ranch, which is kind of in the valley over by Warner Brothers. And that was the house they used in Lethal Weapon when he was sitting on the toilet and the bomb was on there and they blew the toilet through the roof. That was the same house. And, you know, years before that, it was also the outside of the Bewitched house. So that was the Bewitched house.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Little fun facts.
I know, kind of cool. Well, you know, when they put out a press release that we were going to blow up that house, about 4 or 5 characters from Bewitched showed up on the set to see what they were going to do, how they were going to blow up that house, because, you know, obviously that meant something to them over the years they worked at that house. So, you know, all of a sudden I'm standing there and there's Gladys Kravitz and Dr. Bombay. There were like all sorts of these people that I grew up with, you know,
right.
You know, my time when I was growing up. So that was kind of cool. That was kind of fun.
Now, one, you mentioned like little tidbits of the show that some people may or may not have caught. One of those is kind of one of these things on the internet that's floating around as a conspiracy theory, sort of. During Tool Time, anytime Tim would tell a joke that was inappropriate or whatever, sometimes there would be a phone number that would flash on the screen, but the area code was for a number in Illinois. Rumor has it when you called that number, it would tell another inappropriate joke or something. So do you know anything about this number?
Really?
Was that an inside
I
joke?
don't.
Okay.
I don't know anything. Well, it was a 555 number, wasn't it?
I thought so, but I was just reading this
now.
article, and it's talking all about the theory behind.
Well, now there was a address, and I think they got mailed to that address.
All right.
I'm pretty sure, but I'm not. You know, I can't be positive.
It's been a long
but
time.
No, I didn't hear anything about that. That's funny.
kind of more going personally with you. Now, you were a TV star in the 90s before social media, so you didn't really get any immediate reaction from fans to a particular episode or maybe something you had done, but obviously now that's changed. Do you pay attention to anything on the internet about projects you're in or what fans liked or didn't like? How aware are you now of fan, talking about your stuff?
I'm probably not as aware, tech savvy as maybe some of the younger actors are, that are out there trying to trend and this and that. I do know that, I'm doing a show right now on Hulu called Pen 15, and a lot of people have come in and talked to me about that. And I realize, even though, again, it's a role that doesn't have a lot to say. I'm the dad, and really the show is about the two girls going through 7th grade. But, as a dad, I have some poignant moments that make a difference, that do make a difference. And so in a way, that's kind of nice to know early on. I found that out first season. First season of Home Improvement, I didn't realize how big that was. And as a matter of fact, when I would go, somewhere in the Midwest or whatever, and lots and lots of people would come out, I was almost embarrassed, almost like I'm not worthy for this much adulation, because I'm just doing my job, and I didn't quite know how to react to that.
Did you have any? That's part of our show, is asking about your weird and crazy fan encounters. Do you have any ones that stand out in your mind that you'll never forget? Maybe they were weird or crazy or fun or just sweet. What fan encounters stand out to you?
Well, my wife and I went to Washington, D.C., and we went to the Smithsonian, the Air and Nautical kind of museum there, where they have all this stuff. And obviously, I didn't think this through. What happens at the Smithsonian and these kind of museums is that thousands of kids are bussed in from school to go walk through it. And so when this group of kids saw me, they started running towards me, and I started running away. I felt like a beetle.
Yeah.
And then somebody, in a suit and tie ushered me through this door, and they had me, go in there and they go, "Oh, well, we're sorry about that. We just had Jamie Lee Curtis in here last week. The same thing happened to her." And I go, "Oh, really?" So they gave me a hat, and I had some sunglasses, and I put that on, and I walked around. That was the most intense kind of a thing. When large groups of people see you and they just come over, like, there was cheerleading camp at a whole bunch of people going to cheerleading camp at a airport. And all of a sudden I was just surrounded by these, it was like butterflies. It was the most bizarre thing, just jumping around me. That was interesting. Another big fan favorite my wife likes to tell is when we went to Australia, and we went to the Aussie Rules Football Championship. And as we're walking out, these guys, and they're probably 2 6-packs in, they see me and they go, "Oh, we're going to town," and they lift me up on their shoulders, and they're carting me off. And I have these 2 huge bodyguards. For some reason, I never feel like I need a bodyguard, but they're just standing there watching, laughing. And my wife, hits them and goes, "Well, go get him."
Right.
That's your job. So there was that.
Oh my gosh. They were just doing it in good fun, right? I mean, to give themselves a story.
Well, they weren't malicious. They weren't going to take me up and do anything, but I think it scared my wife that all of a sudden these guys just picked me up and started taking me somewhere. And then there was an episode on Family Feud where a very large family, I think this mother had more than 20 kids.
Wow.
I mean, physically. And she had her family there, and the girl at the end of the family, I think you have 5 up on the panel, she was getting less and less talkative and moving further and further away from the mic. She was kind of, I don't know, I wasn't quite sure. And during a break, I go off, and my dressing room was upstairs, so I get into the elevator, and she got in the elevator with me. And she was going, "I'm sorry, Richard, I don't know what to think. I think my family has it in for me, and they don't want me there, and I'm ruining the whole thing." And I'm in this elevator with this girl who's kind of, going through a very large anxiety panic.
Yeah.
And all I can think of is, well, no. I mean, they brought you. Out of all the kids, they took you. They want you to be there. And she's going, no, I think they do. And I kind of like talked her down, and then the elevator doors opened, and she was escorted back to the area, and she was kind of better for the rest of the day. But there was that.
Huh.
That was kind of something that was out of the ordinary.
Did you ever get a family on Family Feud that you didn't particularly care for?
Oh, no. The families were all great. The families were great. But every once in a while we had these stunt shows, where we would bring in celebrities or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there was this one guy on a show, and I don't watch that reality show, but he was a guy that I guess was kind of, Johnny Dangerous, or I can't even remember his name, but he was really a dick. Yeah, and that's what he likes to do. He likes to instigate and play that kind of role, and I think that's what he was on that show. And I can't remember. I mean, it's too many years ago, but he was really annoying, and he was getting on my nerves. And I don't usually do that, but when he would do something frightfully annoying, I just pinned him on it. And usually I would just pin and go on, but I wouldn't let it go. And he got smaller and smaller, and I felt bad, but I went, this guy's got to, somebody has to stand up to this bully. And that's the only time I ever did that on Home Improvement.
Family Feud. Did that make it on the episode? You giving him,
Well, I think it did. I mean, it had to. I don't know if it came across that way, but you could see a huge difference in his attitude if you go back and watch it. And I wish I could tell you what episode that was. Maybe one of the people listening can figure that out.
That's funny.
But I had he's a friend of mine, Joe Pesci. Yeah. Every once in a while I play golf with him. We're at the same golf club in Los Angeles, and he and his girlfriend would watch Family Feud. And he's going, Richard, that show is so funny, but some of the answers these guys give, I can't believe you would let them get away with that. I mean, I would look at them and go, what the are you thinking?
Right. Yep.
And I'm going, Joe, I can't do that. I really got, but you're too nice. You guys, you can't let them get away with a lot of that kind of stuff. And I go, no, and I started thinking about it, and I think I turned a corner there where I was not mean, but I didn't necessarily let them get away with really, really bad answers. I think I started pointing that up a little bit more after my my pep talk with Joe.
Now, you don't have to spend a lot of time on this. I'm just curious, did you always want to be a game show host, or was that kind of a right opportunity at the right time in your career?
It never even dawned on me that I would be a game show host. That was so far out of left field. I mean, and the way it came about was, Home Improvement was over for a couple of years, and I got a phone call from a producer of a show that they were going to pilot again. They were going to bring back To Tell the Truth. And the host was John O'Hurley.
Oh, okay.
And they need the panelists, so they asked me, and who else is going to do it? Well, Paula Poundstone's going to be one of them. And the guy from Designing Women is going to be on it. And I went, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. And so I did the pilot, and it was fun. I don't know if you remember the show To Tell the Truth.
I do.
But you have a panel of celebs, and they have to decide who's telling the truth and who isn't. And that was fun. And the show got picked up, and then they called and asked if I'd like to do it. And I went, I don't want to do a game show. That just seems too bizarre. And so I passed. And about a year later, the same producer called me up and goes, well, we're looking for a host for Family Feud. And I go, what? I thought Louis Anderson is doing that. Well, we're thinking of replacing Louis. And I go, I don't know. I turned it down a couple of times, I think. Wow. And my agents finally got a hold of me and said, listen, Richard, you're doing family movies. You did a family TV show. This is just another family type of show to be out there with. You should be okay with that. And I finally kind of agreed and did it. And once you make the agreement to do it, I'm all in. I did it 100% and had the best time. I'm so glad I was kind of forced back into doing it, because it really was a lot of fun. It was more improv theater than anything else, because that show, the host of that type of show isn't just following the script and playing the game. There's leeway for him to respond and laugh, and there's things that happen that don't usually happen on other kind of game shows. So I'm so glad I did it.
Now you got to replace Louis Anderson, and then you were replaced. How did that feel? When they're like, Richard, I think we're going to go a different direction. You're on both sides of that conversation.
Well, they didn't even say that. They, what I figured out later is that they replaced hosts every 4 years.
Okay.
After 4 years, Louis was replaced. After 4 years, I was. Then they replaced me with John O'Hurley. After 4 years, John was replaced. And once I saw the pattern, I ran into Steve Harvey and I said, "Hey, Steve, this is kind of what they're doing traditionally, just a heads up." And he kind of dismissed me. And then about a year later, he saw me and he goes, "Oh, people don't talk about that kind of stuff. I'm glad you said something. I will be aware of that."
Huh.
And he's like in his 5th, 6th, 7th season now. So, I kind of broke the pattern there, or Steve did, and I helped him.
Couple questions. We steered away from home improvement a little bit. I just want to go back real quick to when you're filming the show. Are you and Tim hanging out offset? Are you doing stuff? Are you like good friends where you're hanging out with each other, or is this you just?
Yeah, we're good friends. But Tim, he would go off into his dressing room, and this is the '90s, so all of this technology is emerging. Mm-hmm. And he would get on there in his room with his computer or his. He had a BlackBerry. And he was really kind of delving into that. So we hung out on set while we were doing it, but when we had long periods of times, we didn't necessarily hang out. And he had a family, I had a family. We would go home to our stuff. So it wasn't that kind of thing where we were best friends going and doing stuff all the time. But we had a great working relationship, which was fun. And I remember there was this one year where I was done rehearsing my scene, and we're on the Disney lot, and so I figured, like, well, we can walk around. Mm-hmm. And so I would walk around the Disney lot, and I'd go in to see the other shows that were being taped there or whatever. And one day I walk into this one stage, and the bottom has been dug out. It goes down 5-6 floors, and I look down there, and there's like this huge kind of moon set, or I don't know what it is. It's just desolate with stalactites and it goes way down, something that you don't expect. And I go, my God, what a cool looking set. And I go back to Tim. I go, Tim, you got to see this set. We have to use this somehow. We have to figure out how to use this set. And he goes, what are you talking about? Come here, come on. And so we go and we investigate. And he goes, yeah, we got to do that. This is amazing. So he has the power to go to Michael Eisner and say, hey, there's a set over on stage, whatever. Is there a possibility of us using it? He goes, well, I don't know. I don't think so. That's the set for Armageddon when they are on the asteroid. Okay. And the director does not want that used, especially in something like a TV show. But let's figure this out. And a couple weeks later, they called Tim back in and they go, okay, you can use this, but you can't use it until the movie comes out, and the movie has to have been out for a few months. We write this little scene where Tim goes next door looking for Wilson, and he goes, Wilson, you in there? And he's in the kitchen, and the door to the basement is a little open. He goes, I'm down here, Tim. And he opens the door and he starts going downstairs, and it's into this vast, Armageddon set. And at the very bottom of what they makeshift stairs they made, there's Wilson tinkering with his heater for the house, and he's behind the heater. And he's, I'm just fixing the heater or whatever. And so we used it, but apparently the director was kind of pissed, that we did that. But apparently he got over it.
I got to go back and watch that episode. That's funny.
Yeah, well, it was a tag at the end of one of the episodes. It wasn't a full blown scene. It was just, one of the scenes at the end of the show that just kind of had nothing to do with anything else.
Well, let's move into your reunion that you had with Tim and the rest of the cast in the 2013 season of Last Man Standing. it featured many of the Home Improvement cast members. In fact, Jonathan Taylor Thomas even came back. Was that appearance something that took a long time to negotiate or work on, or was that something that Tim had an idea for all along?
No, I think it was totally by accident. Actually, I think it was something. It was a role that my agents submitted me for. It was just an architect who built the big sports store that Tim works at. And when they submitted me, the producers looked at them and they went, "Oh my God, we could make this into a Tim and Al reunion in a weird kind of way." So when I signed on, they kind of rewrote the scene to add stuff that would be, funny as Tim and Al, or, the two of us knowing each other from a previous show. So, the line like where I say hi to the wife and boys, and he goes, "I don't have boys, I have girls." I go, "Really? God, I seem to remember boys." That was all kind of put in at the last second because it just was right. It was funny and poignant.
Fans loved it.
So it was something that I don't think they planned on, but once it all kind of happened, they jumped on it, and it was enjoyable. It was very fun, and they kept me, secluded. The audience didn't know I was going to be on the show, so when I enter, there was like this kind of gasp, and then this sustained applause. And I'm just standing there, like standing, waiting for the scene to continue. And after a while, I don't know how many seconds went by. I just felt like, my God, I can't just stand here. This is embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so I just started the scene, and we did it. And afterwards, the writers were going, "Why did you stop them? I mean, they were going crazy." I go, "I know, but you were going to have to edit all that out anyways." I just kind of like got into it. I just started the scene. But no, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. And the crew, some of the crew is the same crew that we had on Home Improvement. And they noticed, there was a visible change in Tim's attitude that week. With me there, he was a lot more relaxed and having a lot more fun than usual, which I'm proud I was able to facilitate that.
I've just got a couple more questions I want to finish with. One of them goes back to encounters with people, because I'm jumping around as we're changing topics, but to go back to that just for a second, I've always wanted to ask somebody who's got a very recognizable look, and you're probably the closest that I think I would get a good answer for. So I'm going to throw this question at you. What's it like when you go grocery shopping? I mean, you've got to be constantly stopped for pictures almost every single time you go out.
Well, no, I don't know. I don't go shopping that much. My wife does, but when I do go out there, that, people will kind of stop and but we've gotten further and further away from that. Maybe years ago, it was a little bit more, when I go out of town and I'm, at a hotel or a restaurant in another town, that's when it gets a lot more. I like to think of myself as a free pie celebrity status. If I go to a restaurant, I will get free pie.
Okay.
They'll bring dessert, going, "Thank you for coming to our restaurant," kind of a thing.
Nice.
So that's my level status of celebrity.
It looks like once this coronavirus situation passes, you're going to be very busy. You're slated to be in a couple of movies and looks like a TV series as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have coming up and what we should be looking for?
Well, we're going to finish the second, third season of Pen 15. That's a given, because we were right in the middle of filming. We finished a scene, a part of the scene. We broke for lunch and came back, and they shut down midday.
Wow!
So we'll come back and we'll finish the rest of the Pen 15. Tim and I actually might be doing a show, hopefully in June. We're still sequestered. We'll be doing it from our individual houses, but we're going to do a show about competition, fixing, remodeling, building, or whatever kind of a thing.
Wow.
Which could be very funny, very interesting.
Yeah.
The whole thing about our throwaway society. Instead of throwing something away that could be fixed, well, let's have competitions of fixing stuff and maybe even making it better. that kind of a thing.
Does that have a name or a network?
Yeah, the History Channel, and we haven't really got a name yet. We're throwing around assembly required, tool time. Yeah, there's things we're throwing out there, but we don't know what it's going to be yet.
Okay,
called.
That sounds.
But it'll
fun.
be on the History Channel.
Okay,
it'll kind of pair well, with a couple of the shows that they have.
That's exciting. That's going to be really cool to see you guys reunite on that.
Yeah, and then there's a movie where I play a police detective that has the possibility of moving forward. Locker 47. So I don't know. There's stuff out there. It's just we're kind of on hold right now, which is fine. And once we figure out how to do that, I mean, today in the news, the idea of avalanche coronavirusing, where they do a controlled avalanche somewhere, and so that the valley doesn't get destroyed. I don't know how that works, but they're trying to figure out how to get this virus out and about with as little pain as possible.
Right. Yeah. Science is not a field that I would want to be working in right now.
Well, that's one way of looking at it, and then the other way is that there could be leaps and bounds.
There could be. I just don't want to be responsible for any failures.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't, but cracking eggs to make omelets is not the same thing as killing people to save others.
Exactly.
It's the weirdest idea. Yeah. I mean, look at war. Remember when war was send out as many people as possible to get killed so that we can move forward?
Mm-hmm.
We as a species have interesting concepts.
Is there something that you've never been asked, but you wish you would be?
You know what? I probably won't realize that until I get asked.
Okay,
I don't have a secret that that I want out there.
Oh, darn.
Necessarily. So
I was hoping this was the
no.
moment.
I've everything I talk about is out there somewhere.
That's great.
On YouTube.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for joining us. I really, really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. This was enjoyable.
My thanks to Richard Karn for being on the show this week. So, Elizabeth, it was the set of Armageddon that they found.
I think that is really cool. And I think it's even cooler that they got to use it.
Exactly. And I have pictures that I'm going to post on Sharpie Nation. So you have to join Sharpie Nation if you want to see the pictures of the Armageddon set on Home Improvement. So go to Facebook and do that.
He's such a neat guy, though. He really is.
Totally down to earth. And I have to tell you, I was kind of having one of those days before this interview started. And when I got done with the interview and I went upstairs and saw my children again, all doing their homework and stuff, and I was just like in such a great mood because it was just one of those guests where you grew up watching him. I was a teenager when that show started. I was just in the best mood, and he was just wonderful to talk to.
Yeah, I love that. It happens lots of times when I'm like, ugh, I don't want to drive over there and do these interviews. I'm not in the mood. It's cold outside or it's snowing or it's something. And as soon as we start talking, I love it. And I'm so excited we got to do them.
Yeah. We've got a lot of great guests coming up this month, and we want you to come back and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a review. 5 stars on your favorite listening app would be a great thing. And if you want to contact us directly, there are several ways to do it. Sharpie Nation is the best way. We'll see your comments right away on that Facebook group. But you can always email us. How do we do that, Elizabeth?
And hello at fancounters.com.
It's the only thing she's allowed to do.
Yes, I'm not authorized for anything else.
That's not true. Goodness. All right. Well, hopefully we can leave our homes soon. We'll see.
I hope so.
It would be nice. But until next week, we will talk to you then. We hope you stay safe and healthy during these unprecedented times.
We'll see you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Oh, and Richard, before I let you go, do you think that it'd be possible for you to get Tim Allen to come on Fancounters?
I don't think so, Nick.
I don't want to do a podcast with a bunch of sci-fi nerds.